Hello, everybody. This is Alex. Welcome to my show. Today we're going to talk about Kronos. Cronus. There are many ways to spell it. Kronos, Kronos, Kronos. It's Father Time, okay? Today's New Year's Day, January 1st, 2018. Here in Houston, Texas, it's the coldest day of the year so far. It's only 34 degrees outside, which is pretty chilly for us here. Now, Kronos is where you get the word chronograph for a timepiece. Chronology, as far as keeping time. But what's really interesting about studying Kronos, this is just straight out of Wikipedia, the entry called Kronos with the spelling of Cronus. Kronos has very many meanings and assimilations of the characters into other characters that we know by other names, including Saturn. I would even venture out to say Satan, the Grim Reaper, Father Time. I say Lucifer. But he was supposed to be the son of Uranus and Gaia, which is Earth. Okay, he's the first generation of the Titans, the divine descendant of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. He overthrew his father and ruled during the mythological Golden Age until he was overthrown by his son Zeus and imprisoned in Tartarus. Okay, now Kronos was usually depicted with the harp, a cith, or a sickle, which were the instruments he used to castrate and depose Uranus, his father, in Athens. All right. As a result of his association with the virtuous Golden Age, Kronos continued to preside as the patron of the harvest with that sickle. Okay. The Kronos also is identified in classical antiquity with the Roman deity Saturn. Now, who else do we say is synonymous with Saturn? Satan. A star in the year 2017 was named Kronos because it was named after him just last year when it was reported to have swallowed its planets, because Kronos was the child swallower, you're going to find here. Okay, now the mythology. In ancient myth, according to Hesiod's Theogony, Kronos envied the power of his father, the ruler of the universe, Uranus, and he drew the enmity of Kronos' mother, Gaia. When he hid the gigantic youngest children of Gaia, the 100-handed Hecatonchires and the one-eyed Cyclops, in Tartarus so that they would not see the light. Gaia created a great stone sickle and gathered together Kronos and his brothers to persuade them to castrate Uranus. Only Kronos was willing to do the deed, so Gaia gave him the sickle. So Earth gave Kronos a sickle to kill Uranus. If you look at this in planetary form and try to think of it literally, the Earth gave Saturn a weapon to defeat Uranus. Let's see. Kronos attacked him with the sickle, castrating him and castrating his testicles, casting them into the sea. From the blood that spilled out from Uranus and fell upon the earth, the Gigantes, the giants, and the Erinyes, and the Meleae were produced. Different races and the giants. The testicles produced a white foam from which the goddess Aphrodite emerged. For this, Uranus threatened vengeance and called his sons Titanes, which means the straining ones. After dispatching Uranus, Kronos re-imprisoned the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed monster, and the Cyclops, and set the dragon camp to guard them. So here was Kronos, who was in charge of some serpents, some dragons, in the camp to guard the 100-handed monster and the Cyclops so they couldn't see light. You know, I think there's a lot of allegories and genetic stories in there about DNA and hiding mankind from light and somehow ruling a serpent class that was put over us to camp and guard that and keep it, which goes along with a lot of what we know today. He and his sister Rhea took the throne of the world as king and queen. The period in which Kronos ruled is called the Golden Age, as the people of time had no need for laws or rules. Everyone did the right thing, and immorality was absent. Kronos learned from Gaia and Uranus that he was destined to be overcome by his own sons, just as he had overthrown his father. As a result, although he sired the gods Demeter, Hestia, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, by Rhea, he devoured them all as soon as they were born to prevent the prophecy. Now, how did they stay alive or come back? You'll see in a minute. He had them pulled out of he had to ungest them and pull them out of his stomach. When the sixth child, Zeus, was born, Rhea sought Gaia to devise a plan to save them and eventually got retribution on Kronos for his acts against his father and children. Rhea secretly gave birth to Zeus in Crete and handed Kronos a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes known as the Omphalos stone, which he promptly swallowed, thinking it was his son. Rhea kept Zeus hidden in a cave on Mount Ida in Crete. He was then raised by a goat named Amalthea. Okay, now you have a goat raising who we would call Saturn, Satan, Lucifer, Father of Time, the Grim Reaper, Kronos, the Child Eater. Think of all that in today's Kabbalistic, Illuminati, secret symbol terms, and it still makes sense today. The ruling serpent class. While a company of Korettes, armored male dancers, shouted and clapped their hands to make enough noise to make the baby's cries hidden from Kronos. Other versions of the myth have Zeus raised by a nymph named Adamanthea, who hid Zeus by dangling him by a rope from a tree so that he was suspended between the earth, sea, and the sky, all of which were ruled by his father Kronos. Once he'd grown up, Zeus used an emetic given to him by Gaia to force Kronos to disgorge the contents of his stomach in reverse order. First the stone, which was set down at Pytho under the glens of Mount Parnassus to be assigned to mortal men, and then his 2 brothers and 3 sisters. In the other versions of the tale, Metis gave Kronos an emetic to force him to disgorge the children. In the vast war called the Titanomachy, Zeus and his brothers and sisters, with the help of the Hecatonchires and the Cyclops, overthrew Kronos and the other Titans. Afterward, many of the Titans were confined in Tartarus. However, Atlas, Epimetheus, Helios, Monotheus, Oceanus, and Prometheus were not imprisoned following the Titanomachy, and Gaia bore the monster Typhon to claim revenge for the imprisoned Titans. Accounts of the late... Now, let's go back and see the etymology. So, Gaia bore the monster Typhon. So, Gaia, which is Earth. Earth made this monster Typhon. Is that Typhoon? To claim revenge on the imprisoned Titans. Was there a typhoon that got rid of the Titans? Created by Earth, by Mother Nature. Accounts of the fate of Cronus after the Titanomachy differ. In the Homeric and other texts, he is imprisoned with the other Titans in Tartarus. In Orphic poems, which is Greek, he is imprisoned for eternity in the cave of Nyx in Yx. Pindar describes his release from Tartarus, where he's made king of Elysium by Zeus. Pindar is known as the head serpent of the satanic rituals today, claimed to be a Rothschild. I think all of these stories, even though they're mythology, they come from something real that happened. You know, that it might be, you know, like when you tell your children the story of the birds and the bees and you talk about a stork delivering babies before they're aware sexually of how reproduction works, you have stories. So I think this mythology is based on real things that happened. You just have to try to figure it out with the etymology and the stories and the names and the actions, not the direct detail. Look at them as allegories. Okay, so if Pindar was made king of Elysium by Zeus, okay, Zeus was the son of Kronos. So Kronos had a son, Could that be also... No, I was thinking Cain, but that's probably another lower level creation. Titans released the Cyclops from Tartarus, and Kronos was awarded the kingship among them, beginning the Golden Age. Okay, one other account referred to Tzetzes said that Kronos was castrated by his son Zeus, just like he had done with his father Uranus before. However, the subject of a son castrating his own father, or simply castration in general, was so repudiated by the Greek mythographers of the time that they suppressed it from their accounts until the Christian era. Wasn't in the Anunnaki story of Anu, Enki, and Enlil, and those that came... Wasn't one of those gods, was it Anu? One of them was castrated, imprisoned, and eventually sent back to the original planet, right? Some of these stories overlap in what happened in the battles. Or was it one of them bit somebody's testicles or penis off, you know? And then later on you have Osiris with the missing penis, and then the obelisks today. So all of this stuff goes back to this Kronos. Kronos is like the origin of all these Babylonian stories. The whole Roman mythos of today that we call Christianity, Zionism, and even the secret society origins of Islam. Uranus and Titania were the parents of Kronos and Rhea, and the other Titans. Among the king of Libya married Rhea, but Rhea abandoned Ammon and married her brother Kronos, and at Rhea's urging with the other Titans made war upon Ammon, who fled to Crete. But Kronos ruled harshly, and Kronos in turn is defeated by Ammon's son Dionysus. Dionysus is another figure that I believe had 12 disciples, was born of a mother who was supposed to be, he was either orphaned or a virgin, which would be the story of Rhea leaving Ammon, going with Kronos. But he was resurrected, I believe, after 3 days. Wasn't he the Lord of the Vineyard no, that was Bacchus, turned water into wine. Who anoints Kronos and Rhea's son Zeus as the king of Egypt. This is where the Bleeding Heart Mary painting came from, where she's got a bleeding heart, she's holding the baby, and she's stepping on the snake. That painting is from a couple of thousand years, even from before Christ was even born. So it refers definitely to some of these older mythological stories, and not Jesus, Virgin Jesus with Mother Mary. That came later. Dionysus and Zeus then joined their forces to defeat the remaining Titans in Crete, and on the death of Dionysus, Zeus inherits all the kingdoms, becoming Lord of the world. The Sibylline oracles, particularly in Book 3, makes Kronos a Titan, and Lapidus, the three sons of Uranus and Gaia, would be Kronos, Titan, and Lapidus, each to receive a third division of the earth, and Kronos is made king over all after the death of Uranus. Titan's sons attempt to destroy Kronos and Rhea's male offspring as soon as they are born. But Dodona, Rhea secretly bears her sons Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, and sends them to Phrygia. If you're a musician, you know about the modes. You've got Lydian, Phrygian, Dorian. These are all coming from these towns, mostly in Greece, I believe. They were the chant songs of these stories and myths, and they became the modes in music. If you study modes, you can be an excellent player if you learn how to play modes with your people you jam with. Cretans. Upon learning this, 60 of Titan's men then imprisoned Kronos and Rhea, causing the sons of Kronos to declare and fight the first of all wars against them. During antiquity, Kronos was occasionally interpreted as Chronos, the personification of time. Plutarch asserted that the Greeks believed that Kronos was an allegorical name. The Roman philosopher Cicero elaborated on this by saying that the Greek name Kronos is synonymous to Chronos, time, since he maintains the course and the cycles of seasons and the periods of time, whereas the Latin name Saturn denotes that he is saturated with years since devouring his sons, which implies that time devours the ages and gorges. All right, if you stop there for a second and look at Kronos being time and being Saturn, and today we talk about the Saturn Matrix and the moon runs the cycles of birth, and Saturn literally emits a signal which controls our minds and consciousness here on Earth in this dimension, controlled from the Saturnian matrix from the cube. And the poles of Saturn are the hexagon, which is a two-dimensional cube. And the other pole is the eye, the all-seeing eye. And you've got your Saturn matrix. Saturn being Kronos, father of time. Saturn literally controlling time on this planet, Gaia. Very strange, folks. The philosopher Plato, in his Cratylus in the 3rd century BC, gives two possible interpretations for the name Kronos. The first is his name denotes Choros, the pure and unblemished nature of his mind. The second is that Rhea and Kronos were given names of streams, two rivers. And Kronos, you have Proclus, and the Neoplatonist philosopher makes, in his commentary on Plato's Cratylus, an extensive analysis on Kronos, among others, says that he is the one cause of all things, is Kronos, time, that is also equivocal to Kronos. In addition to the name, the story of Kronos eating his children was also interpreted as an allegory to a specific aspect of time held with Kronos' sphere of influence. Okay, as the theory went, Kronos represented the destructive ravages of time which devoured all things, a concept that was illustrated when the Titan King ate the Olympian gods. From Renaissance to the present, during the Renaissance, the identification of Kronos gave rise to Father Time, wielding the harvesting scythe. It's also the Grim Reaper. Observed that attempts to give Kronos a Greek etymology had failed. Recent Janda in 2010 offers a genuinely Indo-European etymology of the cutter, to cut, motivated by Kronos' characteristic act of cutting the sky, or the genitals of the anthropomorphic Uranus. The Indo-Iranian reflex of the root is kar, K-A-R, generally meaning to make or create, which is also meaning to cut. In the cosmogonic sense, is still preserved in some verses of the Rig Veda, pertaining to Indra's heroic cutting, like that of Kronos' resulting in creation. This may point to an older Indo-European mytheme reconstructed as the by means of a cut he created the loftiness of the sky, end quote. The myth of Kronos castrating Uranus parallels the songs of Kumarbi, where Anu, the heavens, were castrated by Kumarbi. That's right, that's what I was saying. And in the song of the Ilikumi, Teshub uses the sickle with which heaven and earth had once been separated to defeat the monster Ilikumi, establishing that the castration of the heavens by means of a sickle was a part of a creation myth. In an origin to cut, creating an open gap between heaven and the dome of stone. So for you flat earthers that think of a firmament that we can't get past and a gap between the waters here on earth and the waters of the sky, maybe there's a dome of stone. It could be a photon belt. You know, stones are made of photons. And earth enabling the beginning of time, Kronos, and the human history. Could this be the origin of the prison planet we're talking about? Of course it is. A theory debated in the 19th century and sometimes still offered somewhat apologetically holds that Kronos is related to the horned, assuming a Semitic derivation from that Kronos was never represented as horned in Hellenic art, which is Greek, was addressed by Robert Brown, arguing that in Semitic usage, as in the Hebrew Bible, Karen was the signifier of power. When Greek writers encountered the Semitic deity, they rendered his name as Kronos. All right, the Semitic deity would be your Old Testament God, which is also Kronos, which a lot of people believe is Lucifer because of the sacrifices and things that the God commanded the people to do in the Old Testament, which are very horrible and bloody. When the Hellenes, the Greeks, encountered Phoenicians and later the Hebrews, they identified the Semitic El, that's Horus in Egypt, by the Greek interpretation with Kronos. The association was also recorded by the Philo of Babylon. Those are the Brotherhood of Byblos. The Phoenician histories reported that Eusebius, the evangelical preparer, he was the right-hand man of Constantine when the Bible was compiled in the Greco-Roman. When Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were made and everything else became heretical and was burned. ascribed Philo's account ascribed by Eusebius to the semi-legendary pre-Trojan War Phoenician historian Sanchuniathon indicates that Kronos was originally a Canaanite ruler who founded Byblos and was subsequently deified. This version gives his alternate name as Elus or Ilus and states that the 32nd year of his reign he emasculated, slew, and deified his father Epigeus or Autokriathon, whom they afterward called Uranus. So this is the Phoenician Kronos. It further states that after ships were invented, Kronos, visiting the inhabitable world, bequeathed Attica to his own daughter Athena and Egypt to Titus, the son of Mizor, an inventor of writing. Who was it that was said to be the inventor of writing? Wasn't it Thoth of Egypt? While the Greeks considered Kronos a cruel and tempestuous force of chaos and disorder, believing the Olympian gods had brought an era of peace and order by seizing power from the crude and malicious Titans. So Olympians were peaceful and they overthrew the Titans. The Titans were chaotic and despotic and bloody. Horrible. The Romans took a more positive and innocuous view of deity by conflagrating their indigenous deity Saturn with Kronos. There you get Satan, Lucifer being Father Time, Grim Reaper. Consequently, while the Greeks considered Kronos merely an intermediary stage between Uranus and Zeus, he was a larger aspect of Roman religion, which is Christianity today. The Saturnalia, which is Christmas, was a festival dedicated in his honor to Father Time. And now it's Saturnalia, and Saturn is synonymous with Satan. Do you see, folks, how Christianity is a huge deception? It's a rich man's trick, as they're saying on YouTube now. And you're going to church. I'm getting off track, I digress. But think about it. When you go to church as a Christian, regardless of your faith, and you have a sacrament or a mass, or you eat a cookie or wine or bread or water, or the Eucharist, you know, that comes from Dionysus. When he was the king and his body was burnt, everybody ate a piece of his body. And that became the Eucharist of Mass, okay? Now, you know what happens when you eat? You get like what Hillary's got. You might get Kuru disease. You don't want to get Kuru. So don't be a cannibal. And when you go to church, if you want to go to church and practice drinking blood and eating flesh, go right ahead. I'll have nothing to do with it. Used to, until I woke up. In Saturnalia, that's a festival dedicated to him. At least one temple of Saturn already existed in the archaic Roman kingdom. What was it? Constantine belonged to the cult of Mithra. And he was said to have converted to Christianity after he saw the cross in the sky. But really, he was just fulfilling the Bible and forming Christianity as his project from his cult of Mithra. All right, and his association with the Saturnian Golden Age eventually caused him to become the god of time, calendar, seasons, and harvest, not now confused with Kronos. Kronos was confined with the name Kronos, the personification of Father Time. As a result of Kronos' importance to the Romans, his Roman variant, Saturn, which we know is synonymous with Satan, has had a large influence on Western culture. The seventh day of the Judeo-Christian week is called Dies Saturni, or Day of Saturn, which in turn is adapted and become the source of the English word Saturday. In astronomy, the planet Saturn is named after the Roman deity. It is the outermost of the classical planets. It means it's the furthest planet away that we can see with the naked eye, where you don't need a telescope. You can see Saturn. You can see Mars. You know what's also odd is the other day I saw Venus and Mars at the same time. If you think about that in a heliocentric solar model, that should be impossible for you to get up early in the morning and still see Venus, the moon, and Mars. If you're looking at Venus, you're not looking at Mars. But why are they in the same sky? So, I digress. But this is so many names and cultures and etymologies and mythologies, and the Roman, the Egyptian, and the Phoenician, and the Hellenic. And basically what we have today, folks, is Father Time. This is time. This is why all of our holidays, which we call holidays, involve blood sacrificing, okay? It's all about the Luciferian philosophies, Lucifer being the light bearer, Lucifer being a burnt out sun, which is Saturn, a brown dwarf, where one pole is a hexagon, the 2D cube, and the other pole being the eye, which is the Cabal, which on Earth is the Zionistic worship of the cube, which some actually strap to their head and to their wrist. And you have the major religions of the world that either worship the sun or Saturn, which is also a sun, or the moon, as in Islam, which all under these Indo-European, Roman, Greco-Sumerian cults and myths became all based on the mythos of the movements of the planets, starting with Uranus and Earth, and then Saturn. One of these people I mentioned has got to be Mars and Venus, in these names. But so I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening about who is Kronos, Father Time, the Grim Reaper, on New Year's Day, the child swallower. Sacrificed his own children because he didn't want one of them to overthrow him as the child grew up. All right. Thank you for coming. I'm Alex. I'm out. Please hit like, subscribe, and come on back next time I post another video. Have a great day. Ciao.